All right, let's get right into it. For a while now, you've probably heard about AI as, a sidekick for developers, something to help write code faster. But what if that's thinking way, way too small? What we're talking about today is something much more radical. It's about using AI not just to assist, but to fundamentally rebuild software from scratch. And get this, by deleting most of the code.
So to really wrap your head around the problem, just look at this number, 100,000 lines of code. That's what you can find in a typical, complex app. Think about that for a second. That's not just a file, it's a mountain of logic. Every single line has to be written, then debugged, then maintained forever. It's complex, it's super brittle, and boy is it expensive to manage.
So that brings us to this wild question. What if you could just delete 90% of that code? Just get rid of it. And here's the kicker. What if by deleting it, you actually made the application smarter, more powerful, more flexible? It sounds totally backwards, right? Impossible even. But that's the core promise we're going to unpack.
Okay, so before we get to the solution, we got to understand the problem. Let's talk about the villain of the story, our old friend, traditional code. Specifically, how brittle and bloated it gets over time. And here's the big shift, laid out visually. On the left, you've got the old way. An input comes in and bam, it hits this massive, solid wall of hard-coded logic to get an output. You have to think of and code every single possible scenario. But now look at the right. With an LLM, that giant wall of logic, it's gone. It's replaced by a little bit of code that just tees up the request for an intelligent agent. The agent does all the heavy lifting, all the complex reasoning.
So if brittle code is the villain, who's the hero? Well, it's this new architecture. We're talking about building software around an intelligent agent. And let me be clear, this isn't just, calling an API for a summary. No, this is a totally different way of thinking about how to build things.
So what is this LLM/agent architecture really? Well, at its heart, it's a design pattern. You take all those thousands of rigid if this, then that, unless this other thing statements, and you just replace them. You swap them out for an intelligent agent that you can talk to in plain English. You tell it what you want, and it figures out how to get it done.
Here's a great way to think about it. Traditional software, it's like a 1,000-page instruction manual for, a bookshelf. It's super rigid, totally unforgiving. You miss one step, and the whole thing falls apart. This new agent-based system, it's like having a smart assistant right there with you. You just say, hey, build me a bookshelf, and it takes care of all the details. Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, right? But the big question is, does this actually work in the real world? Well, let's look at a case study, socialdancer.org. They did this exact transformation. And trust me, this is where the numbers get really interesting.
All right, let's start with their event search. This is the before picture. To handle all the ways a user could search for and filter events, they had this absolute monster of a code file. We're talking over 1,700 lines of complex Python. It was trying to juggle everything, date ranges, permissions, you name it, a total beast to manage.
And now, the after. They ripped out all of that code and replaced it with an intelligent search agent. The new code to do the same job? 40 lines. Yeah, you heard me right, 40 lines, that's not a typo. It just calls an agent that can understand a normal sentence like, find me a blues workshop in Stockholm next month. That's just a staggering difference.
Okay, let's look at another one. The admin interface on the back end. The dashboard admins use to manage the site. Super standard stuff. But even for this, it took 544 lines of code just to set up all the filters and fields and custom buttons. This is totally normal for a web app. But man, it's just so much code for what it does. And the solution? You guessed it, an LLM-driven admin. With just 50 lines of code, they built a panel where the admin can literally just type what they want. Stuff like, show me all new users from last week who haven't created an event yet. All that complexity from before, it just melts away. It's gone.
So we've seen a couple of specific examples, but what's the big picture? What does all this add up to? Let's look at the revolutionary payoff and quantify the real impact here.
Okay, this is the headline number, and it's almost hard to wrap your head around. A 70 to 90% reduction in business logic code. Let's be clear, this isn't some minor cleanup or a small optimization. This is deleting the vast majority of the most complex, most difficult code in the entire application. So what happens when you delete all that code? Well, this happens. Feature development gets 5 times faster. It makes perfect sense, right? When you're not fighting a tangled mess of brittle logic, you can actually build and ship new ideas at a speed that would have been impossible before.
And it's not just about going faster, which is often a trade-off for quality. Nope. In this case, quality went up. They saw a 90% drop in bugs related to business logic. And why is that? Well, a really well-designed agent is just better at handling weird edge cases, all the unexpected stuff that a developer might not even think to code for.
And just look at this chart. This was just their phase 1, the low-hanging fruit. They took about 1,300 lines of code for things like the admin panel and forms and crushed it down to 240. I mean, the before and after bars here tell the whole story. It's just dramatic.
Now, we have to be realistic here. This isn't a silver bullet that fixes every single problem. There are definitely times when you absolutely stick with traditional code, things that need lightning-fast response times, under 100 milliseconds, high-precision math, and of course, anything super critical for security, like authentication or real-time financial stuff. For that, you stick with what's battle-tested.
So what does this all mean for the future? Not just for software, but for the people who actually build it. Well, it points to a massive shift in what it even means to be a developer. We're moving from being a coder to being an orchestrator. You can really see the evolution here. Step 1, the past, was all about writing complex, rigid code by hand. Step 2, where we are right now, is this transition. We're writing much simpler code that mostly just calls these powerful AI agents. But step 3, that's the future. That's where you're not just calling one agent, you're orchestrating whole systems of them, teaching them how to work together to do incredibly complex things.
And that really brings us to the final big idea here. The future isn't about writing more and more code. It's about orchestrating intelligent agents that actually understand what you want, your intent, and can adapt on the fly. We're moving from a world where we write instructions to a world where we define goals. And that's going to create software that can learn and evolve in ways we're just now starting to dream about.